All right, good morning. Can you guys hear me okay? Welcome to Bible Study Live. It's May 2nd, and it's a beautiful day. Ready to get started. Hopefully you guys are doing well. Hopefully you're excited and blessed and ready to open up the Bible and get into the Word. So somebody give me a thumbs up. All right, so Winsley's telling me that it's all good. So let's get started here. I am also on Facebook Live. I know many of you are tuned in Facebook Live. We also upload these to my YouTube page later on. So feel free to go check those things out. Hopefully they will be a blessing to you, and God willing, you can participate in whatever way works best for you. So I'm admitting some people right now. I'm bouncing back and forth between looking at this screen, looking at Facebook. So welcome to everyone. Last week we talked about guardian angels, and we talked about the ideas behind an almighty God, a loving Father who is doing things for our benefit, doing things to protect us, doing things to be a blessing to us. And that's important. Like you need to be able to embrace that, because if you don't know that God loves you, then you're missing out on who he is. His nature is love. His nature is to love you and to care about you. And of course, he sent Jesus to die on the cross for you. So as we talk about this a little bit more, I know that there are some people who tune into this study that this resonates, this strikes a chord, and it's not always a positive one. I want you to know that God loves you, and whatever may have happened to you in the past, whether you were really young, whether you were older, God cares about that. God does not, he doesn't discount it. So I got some verses I want to get into this morning. But before we do that, give me some thoughts, any feedback, anything from last week, and I'll be checking the Facebook page as well. Any thoughts? Anybody here that's already joined us live?
Good morning.
Hey, good morning,
Can you
cuz.
hear
How
me?
you doing? Yes, ma'am. I hear you just fine.
Good morning, family.
Morning. All right. Anybody got anything from last week? Oh, what's on your mind?
I was curious on 2 Samuel chapter 22. I read that, and to me, that was kind of deep to me.
Okay, 2 Samuel chapter 22.
Yes. And I read the whole thing because you have to really because it breaks everything down. And to me, it's talking about what's going on today. About the way we are and you know.
Okay. All right, so we're going to look, we're probably going to work that into our discussion that we currently got going on. We're talking about this idea of people being victimized, bad things happening to good people. And that is a very difficult concept for many people to wrap their head around. If you are someone who has dealt with injustice, if you have been harmed, if you have been victimized or abused, especially if you were younger, especially if you were abused by someone who was supposed to be taking care of you, especially if you were abused by someone who claimed to represent God. I want you to know that that is no small thing to God. Remember what we read last week. I believe it was in Matthew. Give me a minute to look it up. I'm looking for the verse that says it's better for them to have a millstone around their neck. Let me see if I can find that real quick. Okay, Matthew chapter 18, verse 6 is what I want to go to and kind of remind us of this concept. Matthew chapter 18, verse 6. Jesus is talking about the greatest in the kingdom, and he uses a child as an example of how to be, to not be prideful. But he says, Matthew chapter 18, verse 6, but if anyone causes one of these little ones who believe in me to sin, it would be better for him to have a large millstone hung around his neck and to be drowned in the depths of the sea. Now, we talk about wanting to protect somebody. We talk about wanting to avenge. We talk about wanting to see justice. God is saying, you'd be better off dead. You will wish that you had been drowned in the sea, absolutely hopeless, struggling, in a panic, than to cause one of these children to fall away on account of me. Now, let me ask you something. If someone is abused by a teacher, a preacher, a parent, especially if that person is wearing the name of Christ, if they're saying, you know what, I'm a Christian, I'm a preacher, and they do these things, will it make it more difficult for someone to believe in what God has said?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It absolutely will. And so we sometimes don't see the justice. We sometimes don't see we don't see, I guess, the retribution that happens as a result of that. But God knows that God is watching. You got to be able to hold on to that. So we read about some other things. I'm bouncing back and forth between this and a couple other things as well. But any other thoughts before we continue? Any others? Okay.
Anything on Facebook?
It's a great question. I am being told no, there is not. Let's see here. My Facebook looks different too. I got several things going on all at once. Sometimes it's difficult to multitask. No, I'm not seeing it, but my wife is here. She's looking on Facebook. So babe, please let me know if something pops up that I need to be paying attention to. All right. So as we look at this, I also want to draw your attention to the fact that we talked about last week, there being guardian angels for children, and these guardian angels going before the Father on a regular basis, and how important that is. Hopefully you remember that from our discussion last week. And this idea of let the little children come to Jesus. Don't hinder them. Don't do anything to slow them down. Don't do anything to discourage them is a very, very important concept that we have to keep in mind. Sometimes we find it more convenient to sort of segregate or isolate the children so that we can focus. And I've been very guilty of that. I get easily distracted at times. So it is important that we do not do things to prevent children from knowing who God is. Got something you want to say, baby girl?
So I have a question. What does children mean? Because does it mean children of God? Does it mean children? But like, what does children mean to God? Because like in the law, 18 are considered an adult now. and like 17 and younger is a child technically, but I'm like, okay, what is an actual child? Since we are all children of God, but he's specifically talking about little children, but I don't know what little children, like what he means by that.
Okay. That's a great question. Could you guys hear it all right?
Yes.
Yes, good question.
Okay. Yeah, so Anastasia wants to know, well, what constitutes a little child? I think there's a couple of correct ways of looking at this. One of the ways is basically someone who's still in the care of their parents. Because look at Matthew chapter 19, verse 13. It says, then little children were brought to Jesus. Someone who's capable of being brought. Now, either they can't walk or the parents say, hey, come with me. But someone who is not independent. And of course, that can mean, you know, because you live in their house, because you are unable to fend for yourself. I think there's a number of right ways to look at that from Matthew chapter 19. But then when we look over Matthew chapter 18, Jesus says, anyone who causes one of these little ones who believes in me to sin. So could that mean a new believer? Could that mean someone who I guess is old enough to make the decision? So maybe someone who is not necessarily what we consider a child, maybe a teen, preteen, young adult. There's a couple right answers, but let me ask you this. Who is it okay for you to cause to sin? I see my brother Art shaking his head.
Nobody.
Say that question again.
Hang on, I'm a little thrown off by IT. He hit me with that note this morning. I wasn't expecting that. I like it. I like it. So my question is, who is it okay for you to cause to sin?
Nobody.
No.
That's right. So I recognize where my daughter's asking this question, and it is from a really, really good place. When I read this and when you read this, I want you to think about how do you want to get close to that line? If it's better for you to have a millstone tied around your neck, which is like this huge cinder block thing, and tossed into the sea, you're going to get dragged to the bottom and you're going to drown. Like 10 out of 10 times. That's how that's going to go. You cannot swim with a millstone. You cannot float with a millstone tied around your neck. You say, okay, well, that's only for little ones, but this person over here, it's okay for me to cause them to sin. What? No, because he says that right underneath. Woe to the world because of things that cause people to sin. Such things must come, but woe to the man through whom they come. And then he goes into some examples that you and I don't take literally. Otherwise, we'd be all maimed up. So let's get into verse 8. Jesus says, if your hand or your foot causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. It is better for you to enter life maimed or crippled than to have 2 hands or 2 feet and be thrown into eternal fire. Now we get uncomfortable and we want to laugh. He didn't really mean that. He didn't. That's not literal, right? And then he says, if your eye causes you to sin, gouge it out and throw it away. It is better for you to enter life with 1 eye than to have 2 eyes and be thrown into the fire of hell. How many jokes does Jesus make? How much sarcasm does Jesus use?
He give us something to think about. And how he word things. From what I see, it's like, for me, how's I'm gonna judge you when I'm still doing the same thing? How can I correct you when I'm not doing the right thing? You know what I'm saying? So You know, why should I, for me, if I know I'm sinning and not doing nothing about it, and I know that I can be delivered from my God of Jesus, but I keep doing the same thing over and over and keep asking for forgiveness, but I'm not willing to change my habits or my behavior to please my God because I'm all into my thing. And that's a struggle.
I think that's a very common
That's what
struggle.
we've been talking about, but I don't know. I'm just trying to get some understanding.
Okay. That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. So we talk about this idea of does God mean what he says? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Look at this. Jesus says it's better for you to go to heaven maimed or crippled than to have both hands and both feet and be thrown into the fire of hell. Honestly, doesn't he mean exactly what he says?
Yes.
He always does. So we have this idea of, I guess, a seriousness or a lack of seriousness when it comes to sin. And I want to not get too far away from where we originally started. For those who may have just been tuning in, last week we talked about innocent people. We talked about people who are still dealing with things that have been, I guess, done to them when they were young, when they were innocent, when they were helpless. And we want to make sure to handle this with maturity, with love, compassion, and to make sure that we let people know that God cares. God cares about what happened to you, and that it is God's to repay. Excuse me. If you read the Old Testament, you will see that there are sometimes people did things that God remembered for hundreds of years and dealt with it. People were punished. Sins that were committed had consequences that lasted for a very, very long time. So if you are someone who has been victimized, please put your trust in God. Take your burdens to him. The Bible says, cast your cares on him. And I want to read that verse real quick. Let's see. It's a simple verse, but I want you to have the reference. Let's see. That's in 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 7. Now, please don't miss the irony of a fisherman saying this. Somebody about to say something? Okay. So the verse is 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 7, and it simply says, cast all your cares on him. Another translation says, cast all your anxiety on him because he cares for you. Let me ask you this. How many of you have tried throwing a cast net? If there's anybody who's ever done any fishing that's listening to me, you know that throwing a cast net is not as easy as it sounds. If you've ever fished with a bait caster, and I don't want to get too much into the fishing analogy, but just these two, it's not as easy as it seems. You may think, oh, well, how hard can it? It doesn't always go well. And I bring that up because casting your cares, casting your anxiety on God, sometimes you don't even know how to do it correctly. You think you've thrown it out there, but you didn't. It's still just kind of wrapped up around your feet. To get rid of it, to throw it on him and let him deal with it, takes some practice sometimes. So practice it, work on it.
They talk about that in 1 Peter chapter 17 when he said, and if you call on the Father who without particular judge according to each one work, conduct yourself throughout the time of your stay here in fear. And we in fear every day of our lives. But my biggest fear is I don't want to burn. And I don't want to burn. I want to be able to walk on that, having the gates, the gold, and live in that mountain. But the life that we live now and in these days here, it's just like history repeating itself. We still in that circle. And for me, I was a child. I was abused, but you know what I learned? But through the grace of God, forgiveness. When I found myself, stepped to that person and told that person how I felt and what they did to me, but I had to step to that person in the feel of God and ask that person for forgiveness and for them to ask me forgiveness. And from this day forward now, me and that person, we on best level, love each other and everything else. Everybody sins. What? Is you gonna really forgive or not forgive? Because God said, love your enemies even though they don't love you, but you still gotta love them.
Wow, that's powerful.
Yes.
It's very powerful.
And I was able to overcome all that stuff that went on in my life that I know. But through the grace of God, he delivered me because I know where I was and where I'm at. And I know that the God that lives in me, he's a living God. He's a holy feeling. I can feel him. I know him. And nobody can tell me he is real because he is a living God. So I know if he brought me and put forgiveness in my heart without me having animosity towards another person, that lets me know that my God is awesome. People can change.
Amen.
It can change. God changes people. And it's important for us to know that we don't forgive people because they deserve to be forgiven. You really got it. We really have to get past that. We're not saying, well, they've changed, God has done a good work in them, therefore I'm going to forgive them. God commanded you to forgive. First of all, that's why you are to forgive, and it is in your best interest. If you are a selfish person, if you say, you know what, I only want to do things that benefit me, well, then forgive, because the forgiveness will benefit you. Do you go right back and allow yourself? No, of course not. Whenever you have an opportunity, you don't do that. But the forgiveness will help you to cast that anxiety on him, will help you be free.
Amen.
And that's one of the things that we really, really need to get a hold of. We need to be free.
Mm-hmm.
We need to give that to God. He's the only one big enough to handle that without it destroying you. He is the only one who is able to truly give out divine justice. The stuff that you and I do will not be justice. It will not be divine. It will not benefit you ultimately in the long run. It may feel good at the time to get some revenge or to see some justice happen, but ultimately it's going to do you more harm than good.
Mm-hmm.
Any other thoughts? All right. I know this is a heavy topic, so you guys may have things on your mind that may be difficult to articulate. And that's fine. If there's more that comes on your mind, and you say, hold up, wait a minute, let's back up. That's fine. We'll talk about it, whatever makes the most sense. Okay, so as we get into this, let's talk about what you and I need to be doing for those who have been hurt, who've been victimized. What are some of the things you think that we need to be doing? What are some of the verses that come to your mind as we get into this next phase of, well, now what? These things happen, that took place. We got a church full of people who are still dealing with things, or I know somebody, I'm dealing with something. Now what? What do we do now?
I'll keep praying to my God and ask him and everything that's going on in my life and what comes before me. I talk to him just like we talk to each other. We have a communication with our Heavenly Father. We have to learn to talk to him just like we talk to everybody else. We quick to go do everything that's sinful, but we can't have the time to sit down and talk to our God so he can give us an understanding and how to live life like we supposed to when we can get ourselves out the way. A lot of people don't believe that God is real. That a lot of people don't understand when stuff happen in their life. And oh, child, I did this, but no, you didn't do this. It's through the grace of God that he gave you that. That's your gift. Now, how you gonna do it? Is you gonna give God the praise, or you just gonna be selfish and realize it's not all about you? You're not the creator. The creator God knows you from inside and out, but do you know yourself?
Those are some heartfelt words. So true. So true. Anybody else? What are your thoughts? What do we do now? You know somebody, you care about somebody, they've been hurt. Maybe you're the one who hurt them. Maybe you're the one who's hurt. What do we do now?
Gotta be the bigger person to step up. Somebody gotta ask for forgiveness. If they don't accept your forgiveness, when you tell that person, forgive me for the stuff that I done to you and I'm sorry. If they don't forgive you, you did your part. You let them know how you felt and that what you did. Move on. It's up to them to accept that. It's up to them if they want to let go that garbage or that baggage or that drama or whatever. If you want to hold on to that, then that's your misery. That other person's not going to be miserable because they did what God said. To go to that person that you hurt, let them know that you're sorry and stuff. I don't care how you feel and you hate them, whatever. But when you do this, you see changes in your life. But people, they, you know, oh, it's not all about you. We got to work as together. I never seen so many people in this world up against each other. And my thing is, we all go through the same thing. We all wake up through the grace of God. We got to take care of our kids, our family. We all do the same thing. So I don't understand why all this hatred and we works together. I don't understand all this hatred when we work as one, like our creator. This world be better just because your skin, this and that, there, you got a better job. But my thing is, you can't do nothing unless we work together as one. And that's why this world is so divided and tore up, because everybody think they know what they need to know, but still of believing and calling on God and leaving through his guidance. We going up on our own guidance and we are lost.
That's so true. Baby girl, what's on your mind?
I was reading the Bible this morning and I saw Luke 11 verse 5. It's not like completely in line, but if you just follow the train of thought, it should make sense. It's to suppose you have it, well, you can read it, and then it's to suppose you have a friend in need and you go to him at midnight and say, friend, lend me 3 loaves of bread. A friend of mine on a journey has come to me and I have no food to offer him. And the rest of it is basically saying, like, I can't give you anything. And then verse 8 says, I tell you, even though he will not get up and give you the bread because of friendship, yet because of your shameless audacity, he will surely get up and give you as much as you need. Mm-hmm. And for people who are sad, or if they need bread, or we should, out of the kindness of our hearts, give them the bread we need, not just because they're our friends or not just because, we know them, but because they actually need something. And so, like, just say if someone needed a support group, we should give them that, because you never know what could be their bread until they eat the bread, and if they either want the bread or they don't want it, because there's different kinds of bread, and it depends on whatever they need, basically.
Yeah. All right. That's a really deep concept. So first, Rosea is very passionate about asking for forgiveness, which is huge. And forgiving one another is huge. And then Anastasia is saying that there's an example in the Bible about someone needing bread. and it being an inconvenience to the person that's being asked. But because they need it and because they don't stop asking, they get what they need. That's important to keep in mind. And then she hit us with this concept that bread may not be actual food. It may be
Yeah.
some other need. And there's a lot of depth to that. So I really like the thinking that was going on there.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about this idea. This is not new. How do we deal with people who have been hurt, who have been victimized and are still dealing with this? There's no mystery here. 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 22 says, now that you have purified yourselves by obeying the truth, so that you have sincere love for each other, love one another deeply from the heart. So how do we take care of those who are hurting, those who are in need? We are to love them deeply from the heart. Now, we may want a better answer. Isn't it frustrating sometimes when you go to the doctor and you say, hey, this issue's going on, that issue's going on. They're like, well, you need to eat better. And don't tell me I need to eat better. Yeah, I get it. I got this issue going on. Yeah, you need to exercise more. I don't want to hear that. Tell me something I don't already know. Well, that's the answer, though, to a lot of this stuff. The issue in a lot of groups, and I'm not trying to bash a church, I'm not trying to bash an organization, but the issue when we interact with one another is God has commanded us to love, and we're not doing it. You just kind of there, maybe just going through the motions, maybe just interacting, but not loving one another deeply from the heart. This is difficult because if you've been around a large group of people, if you've been around church people, if you've been around family members, there's hurt in being vulnerable. It's painful to love. It's not always easy. It's not always convenient. And so it's easier sometimes, we think, to just maybe not get so involved. That's not what God called you to do. He said to love deeply from the heart. What's on your mind, love?
Romans 12:15 through 16 is in the middle of just a list of things Paul is writing to. I'm reading them as applications, like practical things we can actually do to love one another. And specifically 15 and 16 says, be happy with those who are happy and weep with those who weep. Live in harmony with each other. Don't be too proud to enjoy the company of ordinary people, and don't think you know it all. So that came to mind because times when I've been in need of support and broken, the people who came alongside and wept with me and just didn't even have words sometimes, just was a shoulder for me to cry on or a hug. They weren't trying to tell me, like Job's friends, that maybe I was doing something wrong or, just some plateaus that, or platitudes rather, that we kind of throw out sometimes. Mm-hmm. But they mourned with me, they wept with me. They didn't think like because they have a position that I didn't have, that they were too good to even spend time with me. They just were there. And that visual and that example, I think, is a practical way that we could do better at loving one another.
That's a very good point. It's biblical. This is the template that has been laid out. So my wife is exactly right. If somebody's going through something, go through it with them. Come alongside them. You say, well, I don't know how to fix this. Well, there may not be a fix, but you can be a comfort. You can be present. Let them know they're not alone. Hey, I'm here to represent God. I love you, and I'm here for you. Has that ever made a difference to you? Talk to me. Have you ever experienced that?
Yeah.
Have you ever seen this done right? Some of you guys are a little quiet this morning. That's all right.
I'd say no. It could just because we all falter. That includes myself. So I'm not pointing fingers.
Yeah.
Okay. Sounds like there's some areas of improvement that need to happen then in those who are around you. Anybody else? I'm sorry, baby girl, what? Okay, you're telling me about an example that happened?
For you, the guys who surrounded you.
Yeah, it's definitely happened for me before. I want to know about other people. I have experienced this. My daughter's reminding me of a time where I felt a certain way. Absolutely.
What was the example to you?
Okay, so that was an example to Anastasia. I've received this, and it's made all the difference in the world. It's huge. It's very necessary. Any other thoughts? Anybody else want to share times where you've had this happen, or maybe times where it should have, but it didn't? Okay.
And just to let you, and just to correct you, correct myself, is that it's not that I haven't seen it happen, but you asked like if it's been done like that, and I don't think we're able to execute perfectly on it. So maybe that's what I was thinking of. But yeah, I've definitely had times where God placed people in my life to help me through difficult situations. And they weren't necessarily judging me for whatever I was going through, but more being supportive of that. But in the same way, like, because we're human beings, there's always going to be maybe a little bit of judgment, or there's always going to, in some cases, maybe not executed perfectly. So don't expect perfection.
Right. You will be disappointed if you expect perfection. But to love one another and to care is something that we're commanded to do. So when we're doing what God has instructed, you will be better off. So will those around you. Maybe it won't be the ideal thing, but God can work. God can use your efforts. He can multiply. Think about the 5 loaves and 2 fish. God multiplies what you give him. He multiplies what you do. And he is the one responsible for making it grow. Any other thoughts? Have we covered this topic? I wanted to make sure that we didn't just kind of gloss over this. These are some, I think, deep issues that we need to make sure that we are not ignoring, that we need to make sure we are a place of welcome, a place of refuge and comfort for those who are hurting, because everybody's hurting at some level at some time. That's the world we live in.
Hey,
So
Anthony,
this is
I'm sorry, this is Deb. So
Hey,
something
Deb.
I don't think it's been touched on is, I think something where was talking about forgiving. I think that we need to be much more willing to ask people if we've possibly offended them, or more importantly, to tell somebody who we know loves us that we've been offended. Because, I mean, this has come up before in other contexts, but I can't ask for somebody's forgiveness if they never tell me I've offended them. It doesn't mean that a friendship is restored or, whatever, but my experience for myself and for others is we keep engaging in the same behavior because nobody says that doesn't work for me. Not that the behavior is wrong per se, but the behavior doesn't work for that person. And if even even if people are not into confronting a situation, even through a mutual relationship, to relay somehow, because otherwise somebody's out there wondering, how come you disappeared from my life? I don't understand it. I've even asked you, and you just, people just say, well, it's okay. Well, it's not okay if the relationship is fractured. You back to the beginning when you were talking about being abused, it's not that you walk into the company of the abuser again, because you've forgiven them, but we can all probably think of where relations disappeared that we had no idea why, and might have been saved if somebody had had the courage to say, normally that behavior would have never bothered me, but boy, you said something sarcastic on a day when I just couldn't take it. And I didn't know how to tell you. So I just disappeared. And there are probably people who there's a phrase maybe all of us have heard, but which I personally hate about. We have friends for reasons, seasons, and for life. Being that I personally get really bothered, threatened, insecure that a friend would leave my kind of world, it would be really nice to know sometimes why, what prompted them to do that. Not to defend myself, but more to say, wow, like never in a million years would I have ever said anything to offend you intentionally, but certainly I did. So at least want to apologize for it.
I see what you're saying. And that's an important layer as well. The idea that relationships are important, and to just be thrown away and not know why. For I guess the person on the receiving end, that can be like whiplash. Like, what just happened? What I do, what I say. So
Right.
that we got to try and communicate. Hey, I'm bothered by this. It's work to go to somebody to try and confront them and say, hey, you did a thing, it bothered me. Sometimes it's easy to just say, you know what, never mind. I'll just go away. It's too much work. Or maybe you say, you know what, that person's not worth it to me. That relationship is not worth keeping. So I'll just cut them out of my life.
I don't think it's about keeping. I think it's about completing for one of them, or like finishing a circle. So again, if I've offended somebody and I don't know that behavior is offensive, either from them or from somebody else saying, Joe was really bothered by that, then I'll just keep doing it because I don't know any better. And then it would make perfect sense that Joe at some point would say, I can't be bothered with that. Well, I don't even know that there's a that exists. I'm not even aware of the that. So for me, it's the completion. So this is absolutely for me. It's the completion versus the loose end. I hate loose ends. I don't want people to disappear from my life without my knowing, short of them dying. So that I might have done something that bothered them, and I couldn't even say, I'm sorry about that.
Okay.
I've actually noticed that as a person being from who grew up in a different culture. To me, that is my interpretation of the US culture. It's like a way of being polite. So it's not a godly way, because we're not supposed to feel afraid to tell someone how we feel. So it's not really a godly trait, but it is my interpretation of the overall culture that the US sees as being polite and correct, even though it causes a lot more issues. Because I know I've experienced it just because I'm culturally different, where people get offended because my voice goes up and down, or it's to me it seems like very simple things, But I understand if and respect other people's beliefs. But yes, that is a cultural thing. So it's so embedded into what cultural societies is in the US that it is something to be taught within the churches as something like, yeah, society says this, but the godly way is preferably this.
Okay, so it's interesting, Giselle, to get that perspective. You're coming from a different country, saying, "Hey, here's something I noticed about you guys. You tend to do this." And Deb, what you're saying, the idea of, "Hey, I don't even know what happened." So I think, Deb, if I understand better, what you're saying is it helps you grow. It helps you understand what behaviors are affecting people a certain way. And if you don't know, you can't do differently, which makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
And sorry, just to add to that, not only not do differently, sometimes you can do differently. So you just have to respect the fact that that's the person's way of who they are and how they grow up. For example, when I'm told, like, one of the things that people find sometimes get really bothered by is that I speak with my body, with my hands, and I just am a little bit more animated. And people think, oh my gosh, she's like going off on me or something. And for me to change that, I've tried. And yes, I've become a little bit more like, I've changed it a little bit, but it is still my go-to to who I am. So it's not only about being able to change, but it's also about both parties being able to respect the fact that that's just a difference and it's not somebody trying to offend one or the other.
Makes sense. Deb, did you have more you were going to say?
Well, I sometimes, Giselle, if I know something I'm doing is bothering somebody, I will tell them to consider the source, such as talking with my hands or something like that. I'm not talking about what might be conceived as insulting or demeaning, like that. But being animated, I've just told people to consider the source. And if they know me at all, they just laugh, and then it becomes easier. And I've also found that by having it out in the open, it's much easier for me to control in the presence of the person who's bothered by it. Because I'm very mindful of the fact that whatever it is not helping the relationship. But no. But I appreciate what you said, Giselle, about looking at it from a different culture. Because it's so inbred. I don't know if inbred is the right word, but it's so culturally prevalent that people don't. And God does tell us if we have an issue to go to the person we have an issue with first and confront them. And so for me, confronting is saying that I've been hurt. Confrontational is saying you've been a jerk. Because when I say I've been hurt, I'm only speaking about myself. When I say you've been a jerk, or even you've hurt me, I run the risk of the other person getting defensive. So I've learned to be personally responsible for the fact that I can be offensive versus saying it's a personal problem to the other person. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. We're talking about, there's so much nuance in what we're talking about. The idea of being vulnerable is a pretty big deal. I know people that I offended at work, and I said, man, you know what? I shouldn't have said that. I'm sorry. And in my apology, he said, you can't hurt my feelings. Like it's not a big deal to me. You can't hurt my feelings. Really? And I didn't sort of try and take him to task on that. I took that as his defense mechanism. I'm not easily offended. I'm tougher than that. And I think that's one of the areas that we can come from sometimes, to where I cannot admit to you that what you said hurt me without admitting that I'm vulnerable to being hurt this way. By telling you that, I give you power, because now you can choose to do it at will. And I don't know if you have my best interest in mind. I don't want to risk it. I don't want to admit a vulnerability. I don't want to admit a weakness. So I'm just going to pretend like, no, I'm not offended. You're just a jerk. And I just don't want to deal with you because I can keep my walls up better that way. I can keep my defenses up better. And so that's one of the motivating factors sometimes. I think the other motivating factor that, and again, we need to move past all of this, by the way. None of this is justification. The other motivating factor is if I tell you and you choose not to do differently, you choose not to correct this behavior, it can be even more hurtful the next time. If I say, hey, when you did X, Y, and Z, it made me feel a certain way. And they're like, I don't think I did that. No, I don't know what you're talking about. Okay, now it's awkward that I brought it up. And then when you do X, Y, and Z again, you're just like, okay, now you're doing this on purpose. So clearly you really, really don't care anything about me. So to open ourselves up both ways is risky. It is a difficult thing to make yourself vulnerable, and for being the person who does the thing that may be offensive. And I say, oh, tell me what's wrong. Tell me what's wrong. I need to be prepared to change my actions. It does no good if I say, well, tell me what's wrong. You tell me what's wrong. I'm like, oh, well, that's just me. But then what was the point of having this conversation? What was the point in being like, well, tell me what's wrong? This is what's wrong. Oh, that's just, you heard it wrong. It's your fault. This is just who I am. You can't be dismissive and expect a relationship to remain intact. It's difficult. It's going to take change and work when you may or may not be ready for that. You have to submit and surrender to the will of God and interact. Some people are easy to get along with. Some people are not. But God has placed you in the same body.
Well, I may be frozen on everybody's screen, but I think that goes back to the beginning of this conversation where Anastasia asked, what's the definition of a child or children? And children are very vulnerable, and the big people in their lives teach them not to be. When they say, well, that's stupid, you shouldn't feel that way, why would you believe a thing? Whatever we say with the idea of mollifying children, or like you said, Anthony, you're impatient with her sometimes. All of us are going to be like that. But I personally believe for years that one of the reasons people don't say is they learn really young. You went back to the idea of people who abused. If you tell somebody that you've been abused by somebody who claims to be a person of God, how likely are you to be believed because that person is a person of God? Well, having been abused, but not by a person of God, I think, my thing, it's just that children get abused, whatever that looks like, sexual, whatever, and they tell somebody they trust, a parent or whatever, and the parent says, oh, your father would never do that, your brother would never do that, your sister would never do that, the priest would never do that, the minister would never do that. Well, if your parent is not going to believe you, who are you going to tell? And so I think for me, it's part of working with a child is hearing what they have to say and validating them, which doesn't mean you believe them, but validating that whatever they're feeling came from somewhere, and you will look into what that might have been. But I was very blessed. I mean, it took me 3 years to tell, at least 3 years, I guess, to tell my mother. But when I told my mother, she might have said, are you sure, in a questioning like, did I really hear what you said? Not like, you must be crazy. And then she took care of it. I never saw the person again. And hey, what more could she have done for me? But believe me, I mean, there was nothing, we never talked about it again. But she believed me, and it went from there. I didn't know a lot of people whose parents would believe them, their children, whatever they said, if an adult had said something else or they said it about another adult. So I was very blessed in that regard.
It's powerful. Thank you for hearing that.
Yeah.
It does not always work out that way. And it reminds me, I want to get to this verse here. 1 Peter chapter 4, I think it's verse 5. Nope, 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 8 says, above all, love each other deeply because love covers a multitude of sins.
Yeah.
You guys hear me? 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 8. Love each other deeply. Love covers a multitude of sins.
Yes, it
It's gonna
does.
this is not, thank you. This is not meant to be a trick question, but I want you to think about this. Is it possible for your love to cover someone else's sin? Now, Reggie may think, nah, no. And the reason why I ask it this way, the reason why I want you to think about it is love is healing. Love is restoration. It doesn't make what someone else did okay. But when you think about a salve or a balm or a medicine that is placed over a wound, your love can be that way. God's love is ultimately that. The blood of Jesus Christ heals. His love restores. It repairs. Your love, the love that you and I are commanded to give each other, can have a similar effect. There are people who say, you know what, I was never accepted by my family. I was ridiculed, I was rejected, but in Jesus, I find people who love me. I am now accepted, whereas I wasn't accepted before. That's biblical. You may have been rejected by the world, and Satan may have victimized and vilified you. That's one of the worst things. Not only were you the victim, now he has made you into a perpetrator. You continue that cycle of abuse. And so not only do you have the guilt from what happened to you, you have the guilt associated to what you have chosen to do to somebody else. The blood of Christ heals. When you find Jesus and you find a body of believers that love you, a lot of that past hurt can be healed.
Yes.
It can be mended. And that's one of the things that's powerful. It's not oh yeah, I came to the church and I just feel so much better. You may not feel better. You may say, man, I'm still struggling with this. Don't discount the struggle. There's healing in this. You say, you know what, man, I'm still trying to deal with it and it's still at the top of my mind and it's still on me. That may be the case. It may not. But if that is the case, God can still use that whole thing. And if you can be honest and say, you know what, every day when I get up, I deal with this, this, and this, you may be an inspiration to somebody. You may be that inspiration to somebody saying, you know what, I didn't want to get up. I didn't want to continue living because I'm dealing with this. But because I know you, because I know you are able to do this, it helps inspire me. You can be motivation. You can be an encouragement while you struggle, while you carry these burdens and you come, you say every day, I come and I cast them on Jesus. And the next day it feels like they're on me, or I've tried casting them on Jesus and they just seem to kind of keep sticking around. To keep going to God, man, to keep going to God with your struggles is more of a blessing than to not go to God because you don't have any struggles.
Mm-hmm.
Now that's not fun. That's not the way I want it. I wish I could be like, yeah, I love that. That's how I want to be. No, that's not how I want to be. I want things to be trouble-free. But I recognize in my own life, when life is difficult, I pray more. When I don't know what I'm doing, when I don't know how things are going to go, I go to God more.
Mm-hmm.
Going to God is where I need to be all the time. So whatever it is, if it keeps you on your knees before God, he can use that to bless you and to bless others. You got something you want to say to wrap up? You can't say it from there, though. I don't think they're going to hear you. You want to try it anyway? All right, let's see if they can hear you.
So, would what you're saying be similar to the effect of we can help our love can help God's but God's love can heal?
I like that. Could you guys hear him? Anastasia,
No.
okay?
No.
Okay. So I was afraid of that. What Anastasia was just saying, no, I'll try and repeat it. What Anastasia was saying, she said, the question she has, am I saying that our love can help, but God's love can heal? I think that's a great way to wrap it up. I wasn't saying that as in you know, these are the clever words that I'm trying to put together, but I like that concept. I think that encapsulates it very well. It has a nice ring to it. So thank you for sharing that with us.
And she right,
All right.
love is healing. That's the healing there. Love.
Absolutely.
That's the healing. It's love.
So, and it ain't easy. It's not a simple thing. Oh, I'm just gonna do this. I'm just gonna do it. No, it's a lifelong, daily, difficult sometimes process. But I want you guys to know this is what we are called to as Christians. We are called to minister to one another. And wherever you are, if you are in a body of believers, it's important for them to minister to you. Please let your needs be known so that people can minister. And be praying that these the people that you're in contact with don't absolutely fail you or disappoint you or make the issue worse, but use God and the love that he has given. Use his godly example to be that blessing, to be that benefit. So I'm all out of time. Thank you guys. Hopefully this made sense. This was a little bit, I guess it's a complicated process. It's a complicated topic. So if we need to talk about it more, let me know. I will probably not get into this unless someone says, hey, let's talk about this. And Rosia, if you want to talk about the 1 Samuel verses next week, please let me know. We can get into
We
that.
can talk about that. That'll give somebody a chance to, if y'all do, read the whole the chapter of 2 Samuel, chapter 22.
Okay.
And that way, you know, read the whole thing so that way I can get an understanding, because what I'm looking at and I need to understand is talking about what's going on today with us, with the peoples, even though it's way back in the Old Testament, but you know, they said history repeats itself.
That's true.
So,
All right. So 2 Samuel is one of the things that we will look to discuss next week. Is there more that you wanted to say on it before we wrap up? All right, so 2 Samuel chapter 22. We will try and get into that next week. So we are all out of time. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and hopefully you will be blessed as a result. And love you guys.
Thanks, Anthony.
God bless.
love y'all.
Thank you.
I'm glad I can get on Zoom and see y'all when we have this conversation. It's good to see y'all family. Everybody have a blessed day. Stay safe.
All right, take care. It's good to see you
Okay,
too.
have a great day.